Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Shielded by Kaylynn Flanders. Narrated by Davies. Chapter 1. Even though my throat was as dry as the stone walls of the castle, a silvery ray of hope kept me anchored in the center of the crowded dining hall. Courtiers pressed in all around me, a sea of golden hair and sharp smiles, but not one of them was my brother, and not one of them was his best friend. "Princess Jennesara!" a shrill voice rang out. The conversations around me quieted. I ducked my head and pretended to fiddle with the delicate chain lacing the front of my too-tight bodice. A couple moved in front of me, and I took my chance to sidle away from the girl heading my way. I'd endured Lady Isar's poorly veiled interest in my brother through all 4 courses of dinner. I almost told her where she could corner Wren, so she'd let me eat in peace. If he'd truly left me to fend for myself, maybe I still would. I rose on tiptoe, my hand clenched in the soft wool skirt of my dress, dismissing one blonde head after another. "Pardon me," I murmured as I brushed by a lord and lady whose names I'd forgotten. My 17th birthday was tomorrow, and most of my father's court had come into Hálendi when they'd learned we'd still be celebrating despite the attacks at our northern border that we couldn't seem to quell. Most people had thought the fighting would be over in a month. It had already been 7. The spectacle was not what I wanted, but the kingdom needed it, or so my father had told me. He'd said the celebration would be worth the resources it required, that Hálendi could use a boost in morale. Dwindling resources aside, I'd rather be manning the upper battlements of the castle in a blizzard than chatting or dancing with courtiers. Because even if the white streak in my fair hair was hidden, and I made sure it was always hidden, their discerning scrutiny always left me feeling exposed. But maybe it wouldn't be so bad this year. Maybe Chris would finally ask me to partner for a dance. The haunting notes of the fiddler players mingled with the voices of too many people trying to be heard and pounded against my skull. My stomach flopped and churned, the delicious food weighing heavily now. Wren and Chris weren't here. I touched my hair, making sure the elaborate plait was in place, and dodged around a woman's skirt, admiring the ornamental dagger at her waist. My hand rubbed against the skirt of my own dress, where I wished my sword hung. My father and his court didn't have a problem with women being soldiers, just with me being one. Lady Isar stopped near the Turian ambassador, his black hair and olive skin standing in sharp contrast to everyone else. Her eyes raked over the room. I ducked down and squeezed between a courtier's dress and the cold wall. "First messenger of the season arrived from Turia, and the king sent him straight back again," the woman I was hiding behind said to her companion. My ears pricked up at that. What message had my father been so eager to send to our southern neighbors? "I heard," her companion said, but she stopped when she caught sight of me crouching nearby. I jerked up and tried to sidestep out the door, but an iron sconce caught my braid, yanking me back. My attempt to extricate myself only tightened the sconce's hold on my hair. My cheeks heated, and some of Wren's more colorful curses ran through my mind. Maybe it was better he wasn't here. He'd tease me about this for the next 10 years. "Your Highness," a man from the kitchen said, interrupting my frantic tugging. The candle in the sconce wobbled. "Let me help." I tugged harder, wincing as several hairs were torn loose. No, I'm all right," I responded with a smile as fake as any courtier's. One final pull, and at last I was free. Those closest watched me with surprised stares and barely concealed smirks. Or worse, pity. I kept one hand at my hair and the other on my heavy skirt. My cheeks must have been flaming red. "Excuse me," I sputtered, and darted into the hallway. Had anyone seen the white strands? Cool air blasted into me, sending shivers along my neck. Spring should have warmed the castle more by now. "Princess!" Isar's screech rang above the muted conversation in the hall behind me. Did the girl never give up? I picked up my skirt and sprinted to the nearest door. The latch stuck. "Come on," I muttered with a glance over my shoulder. But instead of seeing Isar, I spotted 2 men standing far down the hall. Was Chris here after all? The lighting was too dim for me to make out his features, but one of the men stood like him. Why were they conversing in the hall? Isar still searched, her nose up in the air like a hound sniffing me out. My fingers threaded through my ruined plate. No one, not even Chris, could be allowed to see the white in my hair. I rammed my shoulder into the door and slipped inside the retiring room, latching the lock carefully behind me. My heart tapped against my ribs as I leaned against the door. Isar's feathery steps passed. In the darkened room, I let loose a sigh that carried all the tension of the night. Being watched by so many was exhausting. Here, alone, my defenses could soften. I loosened the strip of leather from my plaited hair and ran my fingers against my scalp, pulling outward until the strands untangled. I tilted my head one way, then the other, stretching my neck and letting my wavy hair fall over my shoulders. Lingering traces of perfume and wood smoke and old furniture finally settled me. My hands followed the motions they knew by heart, weaving my hair back into a braid that would conceal the white streak behind my temple again. I'd kept it a secret my whole life, and shown Wren only after our mother had died. Even then, when he was 5 and I was 3, he'd known I was an impossibility. The discoloration was no bigger than a coin, yet it marked me as dangerous, a challenge to his claim to the throne. A throne I didn't want. I ran my hand over the finished braid. There were too many risks to leave my hair loose for long. My back and ribs ached from my heavy dress, and my bed called to me. Surely no one would miss me if I didn't return to the dining hall. Voices outside the door stopped me. "Did you see her hair?" one murmured, and another laughed. "She obviously braided it herself." "Positively shameful," came the reply. The voices faded to whispers, but didn't disappear. I'd heard the comments before. I brushed my braid over my shoulder with a long exhale and moved to the dying embers in the fire. All sorts of rumors would snake through the castle if I emerged from a dark room by myself. I'd have to wait. I found the fire iron and prodded the embers until a small flame ignited. A charred scrap of parchment, the size of my palm, fluttered against my dress. Then to the floor. I brushed a smudge of ash from the embroidery on my skirt, but it only smeared. "Glaciers," I muttered. I snatched up the offending bit of parchment, ready to cast it back into the fire. But the tiny flame dancing in the hearth illuminated a single word. Magic. The hairs on my arms shot straight up, and a waterfall of shivers skittered down my back. I poked the fire iron through the rest of the warm embers, but nothing more of the note remained. Though the edges of the scrap were blackened, I could read another word. My father's name. I angled the scrap to the low flame to see what else I could make out. Magic may indeed be our only hope to stop the destruction. Search for the mage's library has been unfruitful. The key must lie in Hálendi, or... A hole ringed with black had destroyed the next part, but then... Strange magic on the front lines. Herds of cattle, now husks in the fields. Collapsed mines. Villages... The cold in the empty room wrapped around me, tightening until my bones ached. Did my father know about this? He must, but the note now cradled in my palm had been burned in the retiring room, not in his study, nor in the council room. The muscles in my shoulders and neck tightened, as if preparing for a fight. The magic of old had been banished ages ago. Now it was only supposed to be inherited by the heir to the throne of Hálendi, by my brother, Wren, his magic marked by the customary white streak of hair near the temple. How could there be magic on the front lines? Unease prickled along my scalp. I'd spent my entire life hiding my magic. Who else out there was hiding magic as well? I tucked the scrap into my pocket, then cleaned my blackened fingertips on the underside of the rug. I paused at the door, my hand on the latch, and closed my eyes. In the quiet, I let my magic swirl to life. The tethers hummed inside me like silken cords emanating from just under my ribs, connecting me to my father and brother. As I focused on those threads, the soft hum of Wren's excitement and my father's anxiety seeped into me, mixing with my own feelings. As far as I could tell, that was the extent of my magic, a one-way glimpse into their emotions. Nothing that could lend me an edge in battle. Nothing like Wren, who could heal others with his magic. The door to the retiring room creaked as I eased into the now empty hall. The gentle tug of the tethers pulled me down one hallway after another, the emotions of my remaining family threading tighter the closer I got. The charred message sat heavily in my pocket with every step. When I reached my father's study, inky blackness coated the hall. The sconces hadn't been lit in this part of the castle. Muffled voices seeped through the crack under the door, and the tethers within me quivered. I knew who was inside. With a furrowed brow, I stared hard at the door. What could they be meeting about with all of court in the dining hall? I pursed my lips, then tiptoed closer. It took only a moment to find the spot where the door had warped away from the frame. A wisp of my father's voice escaped through the gap.
"Our troops are spread too thin. No one can know of your journey to—"
The sound faded as though he'd turned away. My breath froze and withered in my lungs like the last rose in the first frost. Where was he sending Wren? I pulled the door open, slipping inside before I could second-guess myself. My father's study was sturdy and efficient, and all hard angles. He was standing behind his desk, the fire's light casting deep shadows on his face.
"What are you doing here?"
A vein on his forehead bulged, and his anger blasted through his tether into me, followed by worry and the tiniest hint of relief. "Where are you sending Wren?" I asked, before either of them could tell me to leave.
"You were not meant for this conversation, Jennesara."
My father's sharp reprimand lashed toward me, but I stood firm, clinging to that hint of relief to keep his emotions from overwhelming my own. "Maybe not, but I'm here now, and I deserve to know," I replied, my stance wide, ready for the fight. "Please?" I added, when I felt him softening. My father rubbed his temple.
"You have to promise to guard this secret. You cannot breathe a word of it to anyone."
"I won't tell a soul, Father. I promise." I held on to my skirt to keep my trembling hands from betraying my desperation. If only he knew how well I could keep a secret. He sat and gestured for me to sit next to Wren. My brother's blue eyes locked with mine as I slid into the chair, a barely concealed grin pulling at his cheeks. Yet underneath his excitement, for whatever task my father had assigned him, a flicker of annoyance darkened his tether. I swallowed back the uncomfortable sensation and smiled back, though my expression faded quickly.
"It's been 7 months, and we still haven't been able to pinpoint where the attacks at the border are coming from," my father said. "There are reports of a main camp within the borders of the ice deserts."
I tilted my head. "But only scattered bands of wanderers and banished criminals live in the ice deserts. How are they crossing into Hálendi?" Our border was protected by ancient magic. For anyone, let alone an army, to cross was unthinkable.
"I don't know."
My father hesitated a moment and touched the medallion that always hung around his neck. The runes engraved on the palm-sized surface were darkened and smooth with age.
"But with Atharin leading the troops closer to the front lines, we can finally get one step ahead of them."
I tightened my grip on the chair at the mention of his plans for my brother. "How close to the front lines?" His jaw set, and he folded his hands on his desk, the picture of confidence. Yet a tiny seed of doubt seeped into me through his tether.
"I am sending Atharin to North Watch."
His words punched into me. 4 days north, all the way to the border. I wanted Wren to tell me it was a joke, that he would never leave me behind. But he only sat taller, anticipation simmering through his tether, making my heart beat faster. "But he's only 19, I started. My thumb rubbed at a ribbon of embroidery on my skirt, up and down, again and again, as I scrambled for any excuse to keep my brother with me. "And I beat him in our last sparring match, and—" "I can do it, Father," Ren said, as he kicked my leg. "Thank you for trusting me with this." I should be happy for him. He'd been training his entire life to become king, and now he had a chance to prove himself. But alongside my fear for his safety, a dark streak of envy grew inside me, twisting and tumbling like a stream overflowing with spring runoff. "What about the magic being used against us?" I persisted. "Ren's magic is for healing, not fighting." Both men stared at me like they didn't know what I was talking about. The fire sputtered in an unseen draft, unease filling the silence. "What magic?" my father finally asked, leaning toward me over his desk. I sat up straight. They didn't know? When I pulled the bit of parchment from my pocket, it cracked into 2 pieces, but I slid them to my father with a glance at Ren. "I found this tonight," I said slowly. My father rubbed his hand across his forehead as he studied the note. Then he handed it to Ren. "Where did you find it?" Ren asked. "The retiring room fireplace. I thought it was an odd spot to find it, but—" "You really didn't know?" I gripped the edge of the desk and scooted my chair closer. "Have you ever heard of magic like this? Cattle left as husks? Mines collapsing?" Dread filled my chest, heavy and sour, choking me until I realized most of the fear came from my father's tether. A few deep breaths, and my emotions were once again my own. "What is this about a search for the mage's library?" Ren asked, pointing to the top of the fragment. "Did you authorize one? And what of a key?" My father shook his head and rubbed his thumb over the medallion, staring at the note without seeing it. I had heard the tale of the mage's library. Everyone in the kingdom had. But it was a bedtime tale for children, a legend from a different time when mages roamed the continent across the sea. Every 100 years or so, someone would foolishly set out to find the mage's library, but no one returned with any success, if they returned at all. Why would someone waste time looking for it instead of focusing on the attacks? I cleared my throat. "Surely, with magic being used, you won't send Ren." My father settled the medallion against his tunic and nodded. "This must be why my thoughts keep urging me to send a Thorin. His magic will turn the tide for us." "I could help too." The thought of my brother in danger and my not being there to guard his back made me ill. I took a deep breath. "I have A sharp pain in my foot cut my argument short. I glared at my brother. "I will find out what's happening, Father," Ren interjected with a nod. "You'll be safer if no one knows you've gone to North Watch," my father continued, his eyes fixed once again on the note. "And when he's suddenly not in the castle anymore?" I asked, wondering how they planned to keep this from the courtiers, whose daughters constantly tracked Ren's movements in the castle so they could flirt with him. He'd never be able to leave without someone noticing.
"By then, it will be too late for anyone to interfere."
So not even the council knew, which could mean only one thing. "Who don't you trust, Father? Do you know who wrote the note?" The worry my father had been feeling for weeks tightened my shoulders.
"I do not want you involved in this, Jennesara," he snapped.
He leaned toward me, and the medallion around his neck swung forward. He caught it before it hit the desk. Then he did something I'd never seen him do. He pulled the chain with the medallion over his head and took it off. He brushed his thumb over the engravings on its surface and extended the artifact to Ren.
"A Thorin, take the medallion of sight. As heir to the throne, its magic will be strong for you. It will keep your mind clear from deception and aid your decisions in North Watch."
Ren's wide eyes met mine before he deftly took hold of the medallion, reverently slipping it around his neck and under his tunic. But over all of his astonishment and excitement, his determination is what made my stomach sink.
"Thank you, Father," he said. "I won't disappoint you."
The ache inside me spread. He would leave me behind then. I started to stand. I should—
"Sit, Jennesara."
My father shifted in his seat, stood from his desk. faced the window.
"Atharin, you may go."
My brother hesitated and felt unease? No, something else. Whatever it was, he knew what was coming.
Yes, Father."
He brushed his knuckles against his chin as he left, a subtle gesture he used countless times when he couldn't speak the words aloud.
"Chin up, Jenna."
I kept my breathing steady, unwilling to break the silence. The click of the door stretched through the quiet of the study, but still my father faced the window.
"You will turn 17 tomorrow,"
he finally said. I waited, cautiously opening myself to his tether, ready to pull away if it threatened to overwhelm me again. But his feelings were softer now, tender, with the smooth edges of age-old sorrow and grief as deep as time.
"I met your mother when she was your age."
I went perfectly still, my breath catching in my lungs. He never spoke of my mother.
"She was visiting Hálendi with her parents. She'd lived on the coast her whole life, in Hálendi's only port city, and she brought the waves and wind of the sea with her into the castle."
He swallowed hard.
"You look just like her, you know."
He turned then and shuffled his feet, swallowed again.
"I know I haven't—"
He straightened his shoulders and started again. The relief in his tether strengthened.
"I'm glad you're here, because I have news. Last fall, King Marco sent an official betrothal request to join his eldest son to you in marriage."
I flinched at the change in subject, at the switch in his emotions from tenderness to unyielding determination. He continued before I could form a response.
"I sent your acceptance before the pass closed. If—"
"What?" I blurted. My heart pounded so hard my hands started to shake. "I didn't accept anything." He pursed his lips, and a hint of regret laced the determination in his tether. I didn't like that regret. "You can't force me into a betrothal," I insisted. It's
done,"
he said, as he rubbed his neck where the chain of the medallion no longer rested. My jaw hung open, but no words escaped. There were rules in place, centuries of customs that protected our citizens from forced marriages. When I didn't respond, he cleared his throat.
"A messenger arrived this afternoon. The prince invited you to Turia for the month-long evaluation of the betrothal. I replied, agreeing to the invitation on your behalf."
The message he'd been so eager to send? It was this? He stopped fidgeting and finally met my gaze.
"If you find anything amiss, any reason to back out, I will support you."
I shook my head and shot to my feet. The hem of my dress caught under my boot, and I lurched to the side. I yanked the fabric away, crushing it in my fist. Then why send an acceptance I didn't agree to in the first place? Why the secrecy?
"The fighting at our border should have been resolved months ago, but it's only worsening. The majority of our people are not the warriors they once were. The courtiers—"
"It's not my fault those lazy courtiers won't lift a sword. What if I trained—" His hand sliced through the air, battling my words away.
"We need support from Turia, especially if magic is involved. And the Regans are pressuring Marco into an alliance. One Marco doesn't want."
I folded my arms and widened my stance. "You agreed to the marriage months ago, before you knew magic was involved," I said, trying to stay calm, trying to make him see reason. "What aren't you telling me?" My father sighed, deep and long. The moaning wind and the crackling fire filled the silence as I waited him out.
"It's the medallion."
He began pacing, and his tether coiled so tight with anxiety I had to roll my shoulders back.
"For weeks, months, if I'm being honest. It's been warning me."
"Warning you?" I asked, staying still in hopes he'd say more. He'd never spoken to me about the medallion before. "About the border?" He nodded, then shook his head.
"The medallion of sight doesn't reveal a defined path. More like impressions. Something's coming. I've done everything I can think of to protect our borders, but with this report of magic—"
He stopped speaking, lost in thought. I stepped forward eagerly. "Father, I can help."
"No."
He sliced his hand through the air again.
I need you in Turia.
I don't want to go to Turia. My voice rose, the words tumbling out before I could catch them.
I signed the documents. My father slapped the desk, papers flying under his hand. It is done. This is how you can help.
Then it clicked. The feeling I'd sensed in Wren. It was guilt. He'd known about the betrothal. But for how long? I pushed the prickling ache down. I'd get answers from my brother later.
You will be safe in Turia, my father muttered as he rubbed his forehead. I swallowed my angry retort. Instead, I drew inward until I could sort the emotions in his tether more clearly. Frustration, unease, regret. I sat in my forgotten chair and folded my hands in my lap.
You don't really want to send me away to Turia, I started softly. I know you don't.
His eyes fell shut, and his brow furrowed. I licked my lips, hoping I could prove my loyalty to Hálendi in another way. I could go with Wren to North Watch, or... His eyes snapped open, his shoulders tense and his eyes fierce. I would not send you into a war unless you were the last able-bodied warrior in Hálendi. He turned away from me to study the tapestry behind his desk. I controlled my frustration and measured my words carefully.
I want to help, Father. My skills are unmatched. Surely...
I know you are adept in a practice ring, but that's all it is, Jennesara. A practice ring. He pinched the bridge of his nose. You have no real experience in battle, or even in training others.
I flew to my feet and braced myself on his desk with both hands. Whose fault is that? All I've ever sought is to prove myself beyond our castle walls, and you've done everything you could to keep me from that. Now you tell me I'll be packed up and shipped away, married to a prince I've never met, and pretending a foreign kingdom I've never visited is my home. I've done everything you've ever asked, and at the moment when I could be of use, could aid my brother and my kingdom, you dismiss me?
I cannot send you to the border, he shouted. His eyes flashed. The tendons in his neck tightened. A wave of his frustration slammed against me. He inhaled deeply and crossed his arms over his chest. His voice was quiet when he spoke again. I cannot send you to the border. He looked down at his desk. I will not. He lifted his head to face me again. Deep pools of sorrow and exhaustion reflected in his eyes. We are sending more troops to the north. A Thorin will direct them where they are most needed to prevent attacks deeper within our borders.
An ache formed at the back of my throat, and a chill bled through me. You just said we don't have enough troops.
It is part of the betrothal agreement. When you set a date for the marriage, King Marco will send his troops to assist us.
I fell back into my chair. So the sooner I accepted my fate, the sooner my countrymen would cease dying on the border. I'd fallen through ice into a lake once, and the cold washing over me now felt the same as it had then. You said you'd support me if I found a reason to break the betrothal, I said, the walls looming closer with every breath. My father sagged into his own chair.
And I will, should that happen.
But I could feel his hope that I would set a date and marry, stay safely tucked away in Turia. I clasped my hands in front of me. Anger, frustration, and sorrow leaked out of the tiny fissures widening within me. I wished I could hold on to anything other than the emptiness. When will I leave? I asked, biting off the words like a bitter medicine.
The day after your birthday. Wren will accompany you until you leave the outer villages of Helenborg, then discreetly separate from the party.
The air whooshed from my lungs. So soon? I'd always loved my birthday, a day of freedom from my usual routine. And now it would be my last day at home.
We cannot delay, he said, his spine bowing until he looked much older than he was. This is what I need from you. What Hálendi needs.
His words struck me, their echo silencing the arguments I had ready. I stood and straightened my dress. My eyes stayed fixed on the edge of his desk. I am a princess of Hálendi. I will do my duty to my kingdom, I said, echoing what he'd admonished me with so many times. The words tasted sour, and my voice crumbled until...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?